Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight for a special live screening of the new documentary feature, One Vote. We're going to screen share this film in its entirety. It runs about 78 minutes, followed by a live Q&A with director-producer Christine Woodhouse. This event is part of our ongoing series of SCA Votes 2020 events. We have a variety of things in the works, including an SCA Votes film contest that we'll announce on September 22nd. We're also working on a special event with CalPenn for early October. So I hope that you will stay engaged and tell people about our voter registration and get out the vote events and initiatives throughout the next couple of months. We only have 50 days left until election 2020, so I encourage everyone to make sure that they're registered to vote and continues to stay active as we approach the election. So I hope that you enjoy this film and will join us for the Q&A to follow. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll see you in 78 minutes. And we'll at least be able to capture the second half of the conversation and the audience questions. So yeah, the hunting sequence is
right?
particularly a unique storyline, and I'm curious because when you did film it, what were the discussions with your editor about deciding to include it?
Yeah. So I'm sad to say now, at the beginning, we did hesitate to put it in the film, right? Because we thought this might turn some people off. And when I look back, I think that's terrible. This is part of these people's story. And this shit really happened on election day. And so, of course, we needed to include it. I was in one screen, we were at the Nashville Film Festival, and that was the only screening where people got up from the audience and walked out because they were upset about the hunting scene and said, oh, you shouldn't have put that in the movie. But I mean, obviously, there are a lot of beautiful things about that, right? The 13-year-old kid is very excited. It's his first time. And, these people hunt to support themselves. They run a hunting lodge. That's the lodge that you see in the beginning of Alaska is actually a place where people go to hunt. And there's even a little bit of a gun safety exposition, like when the kid walks towards his dad and he's holding the rifle, the first thing the dad does is he reaches up and grabs the end of the rifle and points it away right before they start talking. So we edited it down quite a bit. We have every second of the dismemberment, is that too gross to say, of the caribou, and
the harvesting of the
we edited it down quite a lot. Yeah.
Well, so what I find really interesting about that one is at the end, the mother says, no, like we'll have to skip the supplies. Voting is more important. And I'm like, you've got a film crew. Was that even a choice?
I know, right? I don't know. She sounded legit there. I mean, they might have blown us off and stopped to get supplies. I'm not really sure, but yeah. Oh. So is it obvious when you're watching her that like the person with the camera is like crouched down in the front seat, right?
I wasn't thinking about who was shooting it, but as someone who's, like watches a lot of documentaries, I'm like, it's not like there is no cameraman there, like, it's not like we're gazing in and they're not aware that decision is going to be something that the filmmakers are going to
when we're editing that together, I mean, that crew did an amazing job. By the way, we found the film crew included people that had filmed in Iditarod because a dog sled is very difficult to film, and they couldn't have done a better job. I mean, it was probably the best footage that we got. But we couldn't cheat and use cutaways from different times of the day inside the car because there's the first half of the trip, and then the lighting wasn't great. The second half of the trip, there's the antler is sticking up behind Bob's head, right? So you can't cut back and forth. Once the antler is introduced, it's there for the rest of the day. So that was an editing challenge. But
so once you have all of your crews in place, how much real-time stuff are you seeing what sort of direction are you giving them? Obviously, you've got protagonists in each place.
Yeah.
So that,
We used, I think you would almost call it an assistant director. They're credited in the film as story producers. So we had a sort of a director for each story on site. And that's a very early credit in the film, right after, are the story producers. So I had the overall vision, but I found really good people in each location that understood the character, that had a lot of conversations with the character beforehand. We had kind of mapped out what we were looking for. But I would say more than other documentaries, this one is just what we got, right? There were very few. I think they had Michael Heiser walk down a sidewalk, a couple of times to get a better shot. But most of the footage was no do-over, one time, that's it, and hopefully you get it. So thanks be to God for the guy in South Carolina, who's actually great, Rex Miller, who's a great cameraman, who noticed when Brenda Williams was just standing in line, right? Very boring scene. And then her head pops up and she walks down the hall because she hears something happening at the other end. And she goes and intervenes with the homeless guy, Bernie, right? To help him be able to vote. And like, if the cameraman had been paying attention, to me, that was like a little moment of gold in the footage when we found that, when it came back. So a lot was unscripted. A lot was just real shit that happened on election day. And we felt lucky to get enough of it to, make the film zip along pretty well.
but that scene in particular with Brenda and Bernie is particularly touching in its honesty, and he's really sharing a lot. And I'm curious if there was anything particular that you guys had to do to make that moment feel comfortable and possible, since he's not a character that's being filmed throughout the whole day,
Right.
stepping into something, and then sharing so much.
Right. I think it's honestly credit to Brenda, right? She has a way of touching people. So you notice the coincidence, right? She goes to help him. And then it turns out the reason he's there to begin with is because years earlier, he had been locked up in a detention center. And, the people in the detention center are able to register and vote because they have not, in most cases, been convicted of a crime, right? They're what are called pretrial detainees. So they haven't posted bond, or bond was denied or whatever, and they're locked up pending trial. They're perfectly able to vote. It's under the constitution of every state, but they're unable to vote because they can't leave the prison, right? Then nobody's going to help them go to the polls or give them a temporary release to be able to vote. So someone coming to the prison and bringing the apparatus of the election with them is the only way these people can vote. Bernie had been in that situation years before, and Brenda had registered him and helped him to vote. And when he was out, even though he was homeless, he was not going to miss voting in an election, which is kind of a testament to the power of the volunteer work that she does. And so he had actually walked, he has no car, right? He had walked more than 3 miles to the courthouse to be able to vote. And initially they turned him away just due to a misunderstanding, right? They had a photo of him already in the system. And if they had looked for it, they would have just let him vote right away. But he didn't have a photo ID. So they sent him to go get a photo ID without checking if they really needed it. They already had a picture of him. Anyway, that was a long answer, but I think it was, we did, that was the one scene when we edited it where we cheated a little bit. So we took the big shot of the two of them speaking and we punched in as if we had 2 cameras. So we only had a single camera on each location to show his face and then to show Brenda's reaction to what he was saying, just because, his face is so beautiful and I wanted people to be able to see it.
I'm curious to learn a little bit more about the shoot with Warren Buffett, because my guess is everywhere he goes, he draws a certain crowd. So were you the only crew shooting with him? And
so, yeah, we were. So he had, because of the constraints of the trolley. So originally we reached out to him. He said that he himself was going to drive 10 people to the polls on election day. He came out with that announcement. So we contacted his office then and requested to be able to film him in the documentary. And while our conversations with them were going back and forth, and that was obviously very difficult to get through that hoop, we had to cut together a mini film from found footage, right? At like a 10-minute sizzle to show him what the film would be like. We had to write up the bios of all the other characters. We had to talk about the fact that the film was going to be nonpartisan and sort of what the spirit of it was going to be. But while we were in that process, he decided, instead of driving people himself, to take people on Ollie the trolley. And at that point, they had 102 media requests to follow him on the trolley, and they could only take one crew. And so we got through that, and we were the one.
And I mean, this film has taken some time to be shared with the public. Was there any use of that footage for other media purposes?
No, we didn't. We still have it. And I think it is an important, it's an important historical record because he's such a significant, figure, right, in American cultural life and financial life, et cetera. So we will probably convey it to his foundation, right, to be part of his permanent records. But to be clear, we did our festival run with the film. We edited all during 2017. And we did a festival run in 2018. And then in the fall of 2018, we took the festival cut to colleges, right? Not to USC, but to 64, 65 college campuses in connection with voting, events on college campuses, right? Different groups that help support college kids being able to vote or encourage kids to be able to vote. And it was actually that experience, which is what we're doing right now, of physically being in auditoriums all over the US watching the film with college kids, that made us decide to hold it back and release it in 2020, where we thought it could have the most impact. Because, the festivals were fun and we got some awards and it was a good experience, but the in-person screenings with college kids was eye-opening. That was where kids said, I never thought about it this way. I never, I would think that I would miss voting, but after watching Brenda Williams, like, I'm not going to miss voting, and I'm going to drive all my roommates, and I'm going to make sure my parents vote. And we realized, like, okay, the film kind of is working on people in a little bit more profound way than we had anticipated. So,
well, let me ask you something that might be a bit loaded or hard to answer, but we would normally be doing something in person where we're also potentially having experts on how to register and potentially giving out food or something to incentivize. But what do you think is effective in helping to encourage people who maybe, particularly young people, who may not sort of naturally be inclined to go vote, to get interested? Because there is a certain amount of a self-selecting crowd that will watch a documentary about voting rights. And I mean, obviously it's about voting day, but tied into it is this whole idea that, voting is a responsibility of a citizen, and, people have fought and died for those rights. And, there are many reasons why someone might not vote, but it's a tough one to really think about right now. How do you encourage someone who wasn't planning to vote to get out and vote? And it's got to be, I'm just trying to be creative, because we do have months where we're like doing whatever we can to try and encourage people to register.
Yeah, I think you're right. You have to make it fun. So if we could have an in-person event with, I would have had Brenda Williams or something like that there if we were able to come to USC, because obviously that's a great venue. Thank you for having us, by the way. I mean, I think that the film is one contribution to what needs to be a collective effort. So we're trying to get at people who are turned off by the partisanship, right? And turned off by politics. So you notice the film, like, miraculously, there's no discussion of the candidates. There's no discussion of who people are voting for. There's no real discussion of the issues. I did sneak in that conversation in the bar at the end of the day in Club Lucky where they're talking about healthcare. And I thought that's a good illustration of that particular story, because people vote, they drink, and then they happen to, shoot the shit on the issues. But I really put that scene in there because of the girl sitting at the table who says not a word, but is wearing a knit pink cap, right? And I was like, that pink cap is excellent foreshadowing. So I don't know if anybody else picked up on it, but I was like, that conversation is going in there. But, we took the approach that if you could bring characters that kind of touch your heart, or are interesting. Some people might be interested in Warren Buffett. Other people are going to be wowed by the Bondies. Other people are going to get, you know, their heartstrings tugged at by Michael Heiser or Brenda Williams. That's one way of getting those people. And, you know, their guilt, I think, in lecturing is not the way to do it. I think you have to make voting feel fresh and clean, you know, not the hyper partisanship that people experience on Twitter, but just something that's about, hey, don't you want to be part of it, right? Even if your candidate isn't going to win, don't you want to be part of the celebration? Don't you want to be a participant, you know, at the table? And hopefully we're making a little contribution to that. I know more college kids voted in 2018 because of this film. I can promise you that, because I met a couple thousand of them.
Well, let me ask one last question before we start going to the audience questions. I'm curious because of the storyline that's at the tavern, and it might have been in the film, so I apologize if I missed it. But how do places become polling locations? Because I feel like, you know, USC might have a bigger turnout if it moved to Traditions, the campus bar, and away from Felix Chevrolet, the car.
Yeah. Is Felix Chevrolet a voting place?
It was when I voted at USC.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So, you know, voting, so this is a little bit part of the context of the film. Voting is governed in the US by state, right? Which is very different than every other country. So how you vote, the requirements, you register, what kind of ID, what it looks like, how convenient it is, how long a line you have to stand in, that depends on what state you're in, and a lot of times even within a state, what area you're in, right? And so that was also a little bit of an interesting backdrop that we intended to show in the film. It's just the different experiences, right? Like, I love the lady at the polling place in Alaska when she flips over the book that she has open and it's like a crossword puzzle. You're like, okay, this is classic Americana, right? But in contrast to the people in South Carolina who had to go to 4 different places and stand in a really long line at the courthouse to get their situation worked out. So it's all the rules are very local. How you get to be a polling place is, you know, today there's sort of a bias in favor of schools and churches, right? Large buildings that are already known as community centers. 100 years ago, taverns and restaurants were the largest assembly places in communities, and people used to vote in bars. There, you could do a whole film or a good novel about the history of, especially in Baltimore, right? In the old days, they used to gather up the local, I don't know, is it inappropriate to say drunkards, right? And say, hey, we'll run you through this bar, vote here, and then you get a drink at the end of it. And then I guess the political machine would then take the same group of people and go to the next bar, right? And run them through again, have them vote again, and then, you know, and then give them a drink at the end. There's some theory that that's how Edgar Allan Poe died. I think he died the day after Election Day. And I think he drank himself to death the night of election night. But anyway, unconfirmed. But California has a lot of unusual voting places, because I read about different odd places to vote, laundromats and hair salons and bowling alleys and things like that in connection with the Club Lucky story. And California actually has a number of very interesting places to vote.
Car dealerships.
Yeah, so I don't know how you get to be a polling place, but I think the Club Lucky story kind of epitomizes community, right? All the people who live in Bucktown, they know each other, they look out for each other, and then they have fought over the years a couple times. The alderman, right? Chicago is an aldermanic city, so he worked in the alderman there. That's a little nod to that form of organization. They really had to fight to keep Club Lucky as a polling place because, you know, I think people have concluded maybe, you know, drinking, voting, do these things go together? And so they've been able to keep it this long. And hopefully the film buys them another 20 years.
Okay, so so there are some questions. Some of them we've sort of already talked a little bit about, but I still like to call on people who wanted to have a bit of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So let's actually start with Seth Woodhouse. Oh, it's Natalie Hurt. Under the guise of Seth Woodhouse.
Okay.
So Natalie, I'm going to move you over. And There we go.
Hello. I just wanted to know how you like found the stories that you came up, like that you ended up using. How
Yeah,
did
so
you research them?
so we sort of started out, oh, nice light. We had an idea of the kind of topics we wanted to cover, right? We wanted to stay away from the coasts. This wasn't a coastal elite film, right? We wanted one big city, and so luckily we found Club Lucky, and that became our tavern, polling place, throwback story, big city environment. And we really looked hard for off the beaten track story. So we wanted a voter ID story. We went to states that had a lot, and it was a kind of a sad encyclopedia of states that have a lot of voter suppression that's affected through voter ID. And we ultimately, when we met Brenda Williams, the strength of Brenda as a character made us feel that that was the right vehicle to tell that story. There are only a handful of states that have restrictions on felon voting rights. Virginia used to be one, but that restriction has been lifted. So the two primary, Iowa has a kind of felon voter restriction, but the two most egregious examples are Florida and Kentucky. And honestly, Michael Heiser is a cool character. It also, I was happy he didn't fit a stereotype of, a felon. I mean, it's a conservative, religious white guy, right? And I'd like to illustrate that. We wanted to illustrate that felons come in all categories, right? So you shouldn't just generalize about them. But also Kentucky's a very important state politically because Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul are there. And it was a long process. That was as hard as making the film or finding the stories. The last story that we got actually after Warren Buffett was the Bondies. And, we were looking for people that go on a journey. And so I had talked to so many people who have to travel a long distance to vote. But once we met the Bondies, we're like, no, dog sleds, that's the perfect one.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go over to Anne Brashear. And if you are, yeah, there we go.
Hi, Christine.
Hey.
Thank you for your film. It's really wonderful.
Oh, thank you for watching.
Yeah, I'm actually making a documentary at USC very similarly about two activists during this election. So it was very useful to watch this.
Yeah, go girl.
Well, and I actually wanted to ask, you, I think, do a really great job of, as you said, sort of stepping back from the polarization of the work of politics and focusing on the mechanics and sort of civic duty of being a participant in the voting process. And I wanted to find out how you and your editors specifically kind of managed that as you were sifting through the footage and trying to keep a story centered on voting and participation rather than the politics of the candidates.
Right. So, you would have thought that that was the plan from the beginning. And we did make promises to be able to film at Club Lucky. We had to promise Jim Higgins that he wasn't going to have like hate mail or people picketing him. We promised Warren Buffett that the film wouldn't be extremely partisan. But to be completely honest, it was driven by the footage. This was a one and done. We shot on one day, we got the footage, that was it. There was either a film there or no film. And the things that were the most compelling in the film were these little things, right? The kindness, the long day. It was the Latino voter on the trolley who, in translation, he says, today I'm giving my vote to the United States, right? It was such a beautiful way of expressing voting. It's Jim Higgins on the floor in Chicago, like trying to figure out how to plug in the machine, because he only does it every couple of years. It was Brenda, meeting Bernie, and Bernie, when he's so beautiful and graceful, when he thanks her for helping him. And it was just, that's what we got, right? That was what the film, it was under there. You start sculpting away at the footage and you try to find the story. That was what was there. So we tried to be true to what was there. And it was actually easy because that was the story. If we had tried to show contrasting views of the people who were voting, which would have been a cool film, it wasn't in the footage, right? It wasn't there. So we kind of more went with what we had there. And I've gotten some complaints about that, right? Mostly people like that it's nonpartisan because it kind of feels like taking a shower, when you watch it, you're like, wow, people are cool in the US. Not everybody is an asshole, But that was what the film had to say. And so I will tell you this, when you start off to make a documentary, you have an idea of what you want to teach people, right? And you're sort of have this very big ego. I actually had the experience of having the film teach me what I set out to show to other people. I developed this very profound reverence for the kindness and dignity on display on election day and the generosity of people who are helping their fellow citizens without regard to who they're voting for what it's worth.
Great. Thank you so
Right.
much.
Good luck. Good luck.
Thank you.
I can't wait to see it.
Okay, so let me invite over Raj Vora. Hello, sir.
Hello. Thank
Hey,
you
Raj.
very much, Ago, to hosting this event, and really enjoyed the film. Really took me to 30 years back for my first voting in America after India migrating. My question was related to Warren Buffett. The initiative was only for that state and not other state. That was one. And the second thing is, I did not like the caribou hunting related to the film. Yes, I'm a vegetarian, but at the same time, I don't think so it was needed to show the things. And the third one was, I'll tell you in a minute.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so the thing about Warren Buffett is not just that it was in Nebraska, but it's that it's in Omaha. So the US has this very weird system where, right, each state awards its electoral votes like winner take all for the whole state. So if you win by one vote in Colorado, you get all the electoral votes, except for two states. And those two states are Maine and Nebraska. So just randomly, right? Those two states award their electoral votes by congressional district. In Maine and in Omaha and in Nebraska, in each case, there is one district that sometimes votes Republican and sometimes votes Democrat, a swing district, right? And so Omaha, the second district of Nebraska, happens to be that swing district. And there are many years where, the rest of Nebraska may vote Republican, but Omaha votes Democratic. So if you stay with me on this, that's why Omaha is particularly important. And Warren Buffett is super proud of this, right? He's very proud of Omaha. He has a lot of local pride. But there are numerous scenarios where actually that one district could give the presidential election to one candidate or the other. So that's what he means when he says the citizens of the second district, when they vote, their vote really counts. And I'll tell you that this year on 538, right, on the Nate Silver poll forecasting, they have a couple different scenarios showing where Omaha could be the district that flips the election. In this case, it would be to the Democrats, right? Typically, but so there's some layers to that story. So it wasn't just Warren Buffett taking people to the polls. It was a little bit of a civics lesson. It's just very understated because we didn't want to have any talking heads explain it. So it's just enough information in the film that hopefully inspires people to go look it up. And I respect your opinion on the caribou. That was also my first instinct, right? That wasn't what we set out to make. And I was afraid of turning some people off. On the other hand, we were kind of hoping with the film to reach people who have wider values, different value sets than mine and the other people who made the film. And we kind of thought, well, first of all, this is true. This really happened. It was part of their day. And secondly, maybe this will help us to reach some viewers that might otherwise think, oh, this is, boring, liberal documentary.
Yes. The third question was basically Stacey Abrams, just the movie I just saw a few days back about Amazon. It systematically minority votes were taken off, or voting rights, basically their names were already purged out. What do you think? So what precautions we can take it in this coming election?
Well, I'm not an expert on that. I'm dying to watch that though. So I'm glad it's out. I mean, we tried to make a film that was a little different, right? That doesn't take a point of view. it's more of a show, not tell. So here are the characters, here's their day, here's what really happened. And through watching them, you learn some of the obstacles that people face. And there's very significant voter suppression across the South in a lot of different formats. I think, I think communicating with voters and making sure that they don't take it for granted that they can just go at the last minute on the last day, but that they go in advance to make sure that their voter registration is intact and hasn't been purged, that if they have early voting, that they vote early, or if they're going to vote on election day, that they go to the polls. And I think letting people know that you have to be proactive around your voting rights, because you have to reach a lot of low information voters to counter that. And then that's who the voting suppression takes advantage of, people who don't know the rules, right? So I came across so many weird stories of how states work to disenfranchise voters. It's astonishing.
Because your subject is very critical right now in this coming election, because recently one of the party current president, and they say you also mail and then come for voting also. That's kind of no. So that's one of that. That's why your film right now is very critical timing.
Thank you. Yeah, we have to change the name of the film, right? 2 votes. That's bullshit, right? No, but to be totally honest, what we're hoping the film does is, in a very subtle way, fights voter suppression in a different way by appealing to people's hearts, right? So you start rooting for people to be able to vote, and then it might make you less likely to support a law or an ordinance or a requirement that makes it harder for people to vote.
If USC does anything, I will drive my car and to take the student to the voting place. I'm ready to volunteer after watching your film.
Nice.
Thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ago.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye.
Okay, I'm going to welcome over Judith with the last question. Let's see if that, okay.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
You can't see me. I know, I see that. Sorry.
Do you want to start?
I love the film. Thank you for a wonderful, wonderful documentary. And I agree with Raj about the caribou. That was disturbing.
Yeah.
But my question actually has to do with those people. Why couldn't they vote by mail instead of making a 200, I don't know if it was 222 miles each way or round trip, but that's
each way. That's what I thought.
Miles. Why couldn't they vote by mail?
So the full background on that is they can vote by mail. They're eligible to vote by mail. And Alaska has vote by mail, obviously, because you have so many people who live, far out in such a big state. But because you notice they have their son with them, right, in the film, and they homeschool their son. I mean, they live 70 miles from town. And so they try to take advantage of opportunities to educate their son. And that was actually something that we didn't get to really point out in the film, but that struck me as very profound. These people choose to live off the grid, in a very remote area, but on the day when it matters the most, they make this journey. So it's almost symbolic. It's also a very long journey. It's literally 222 miles one way. They stay overnight in the town where they vote, and then they do the trip on a reverse the next day. But the reason is because they want to bring their son with them to educate him and to model for him the behavior of citizens. And I actually thought that was really kind of cool, especially compared to people who live, that was in the fun facts at the end where we said the average distance a US citizen travels to vote is 2.4 miles. And these people traveled this incredible distance. So whenever they can make the trip, they do it in person, but they are able to vote by mail. And I think they have voted by mail more than once historically.
So quickly, let us know how we can tell people where to find the film if we wanted to recommend it to some other people.
Oh, thank you. Yes. So the film, it's currently behind a paywall. We'll probably take it off at some point, maybe as we get closer to the election, but it's on Amazon, it's on iTunes, it's on Vudu, it's on Google, And actually at the cheapest way to watch is at the film's website. So there's a link. It's www.onevote.us. So onevote.us. And there's a Watch Now tab. And it also has links to all the other services. So, Alex, what I was thinking is that we made the film to have a little bit of an evergreen quality and to hopefully endure. So it didn't have a lot of reference to 2016 in particular. And we thought, maybe far into the future when we're all voting like on our phones or something like that, this will feel nostalgic. And it's nutty, but we didn't anticipate that it would feel nostalgic just 4 years later, right, in 2020. But so I think that we're hoping that we get a lot of people to watch the film leading up to Election Day, because it's a way for all of us to experience something that we're kind of it's been taken away from us for this year as a more traditional celebration of democracy that happens on Election Day.
Well, I think it's great that there is this push for people to watch this film right now, and no one knows what's going to happen in the next 2 months.
No one knows. But you can watch it with people that have different political viewpoints from yourself, and enjoy it, and everybody can find something to like, and so.
Yeah, for sure.
Hopefully that works.
Sounds like we all need to move to Omaha.
Yeah, very important. Yeah, exactly. I know.
Thank you so much for doing this, Christine.
Oh no, thank you for having us. This is great. I stayed up till 11 o'clock, so. And I'm not in Austin right now. I'm sitting in New York. So.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for staying up late, and best wishes with the continued virtual tour.
Yeah. So listen, good luck to you guys with all your civic engagement work that you're doing. And, even though it's a virtual environment and it's weird, you just have to keep it up. I mean, you're reaching a lot of people, and it's incredibly important. College campus is gonna save us all, I think, this year.
I hope so.
Okay.
I have tremendous faith in the USC community. So, we'll see. I am curious to know if Felix signed up for the in-person, polling place this year, given the sort of the state of the pandemic. But it's definitely interesting to see whether or not our students are taking to vote by mail, and I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah. All right. I'll be checking in with you. All right. Also, you win Rate the Room. That's a great backdrop right there.
Sorry?
I said you win Rate the Room, right? On Zoom. You have a great backdrop going on there. So
have a good night.
All right. You too. Thank you.
Thanks.
Nice to meet you.
Bye.